Hello everybody, and we're about to rank our Dark Souls 3 bosses in terms of least favorite to most favorite, in terms of the bosses I enjoy encountering and battling the most. Let's begin. Okay, to start things off, we have Half-Light Spirit of the Church, which is probably my least favorite boss in Dark Souls 3. It's not that it's a bad boss by any means, it's just this is the boss that I'm least excited to take a look at each playthrough. And it's probably just because it's more of a PvP situation rather than a boss that has been, I guess, constructed to... It just feels like it's just not my cup of tea, probably. And the only cool thing I find about Half-Light is that you get to bring patches along, and I do enjoy that. Up next we have the Ancient Wyvern, which is, again, not my favorite boss to look forward to each time we play Dark Souls 3. It is mostly just a get through the city type of situation and hope you don't get hit by some of the dragon-kin monsters. But all in all you have to do is get to a certain point in the city and then get right above so that you can launch right onto its head and take it out, which, while fun to do, it is really not fun if you miss.
There we go. Ancient Wyvern.
But that is Ancient Wyvern.
Let's kind of get some
up
space
next we have
over
the
here.
Champion Gravetender and the Champion Gravetender's Grey Wolf. I think they're trying to go for a nostalgic moment with Sif. To me, it doesn't quite get there.
Oh my
This
God.
is never an encounter I look forward to. It's probably a lower end encounter for me. Bottom 5 if I had to put a number on it for sure. And up next we have the Crystal Sage, which can be an interesting encounter.
There we go.
I think it's the 4th boss, and
Which way we heading off?
depending on if you took on the Curse Rock Greatwood or not, but usually this is the 4th boss you do encounter in Dark Souls 3. And the first part of the encounter is not too bad. You just kind of go around the arena, the sage will pop up here and there, and you just keep trying to track down the sage. Sage does throw a lot of magic at you, you just have to kind of deal with that. But when phase 2 starts, it can be a bit much to take on, especially for your first time going through. I do remember this one causing somewhat of a challenge because you don't really know where you're going as the boss continued on. I don't usually look forward to this fight. It's kind of just in the middle for me. It's got some cool moments, it's got some annoying spots, but it's not too bad, not too great. It's kind of cool to see some of the magic spells that get launched. Of course, always go for the purple one. If you can get to the purple one right away, you can get down and take much more health because the blue ones are just kind of illusions that you can hit one time and they disappear. But overall, it's an okay boss fight. And up next we have the Curse Rock Greatwood, which is an optional boss, but a very important boss, because once you defeat the Curse Rock Greatwood, you get access to the Transposing Kiln, which allows you to get boss items throughout the game, and you really want to have that. But as we take a look here, first time through with the Curse Rock Greatwood was not always the easiest, if I remember way back when, because you didn't actually know what you were supposed to do right away, and then all of a sudden you see that there's these little like pustules attached to it. So that did make for an interesting encounter. But overall, it's an okay boss. It's not my favorite, but it's not, I don't hate it either. And once you always know the pattern of knocking out the pustules, and of course there's another phase change coming up soon once you break this main one right here. But once you figure out that you're attacking the pustules area and the sacks,
Should be pretty much all set.
it makes it
now.
very manageable. You just kind of go around the boss hitting those areas until eventually you have to break right through and you continue on. The only issue with this is sometimes it's hard to get to some of those pustule sack areas because of the way that the Curse Rock Greatwood kind of moves around. And of course it has that long arm that tries to grab you, and that is never fun to deal with. just keep on attacking each area, and slowly but surely you slowly break down the health of the Curse Rock Greatwood. And then every once in a while it'll jump up and it'll release its, I don't know if it's like a toxin or something, but all that stuff goes all over the arena, and that's another thing that you have to deal with, and that's not fun. I think it's coming up soon.
Exactly which one.
It's not a terrible boss though. It is an enjoyable time.
Gross. Okay, right here.
Here he goes. He's gonna jump up, and here comes some of that acidy toxin stuff that we were talking about. You don't want to stay in that.
Oh my god.
And sometimes it does kind of make it tricky to get to where you want to go, as we mentioned before. But eventually you do get all of the pustules, and you are able to take down the Curse Rock Greatwood. And coming up next are the Deacons of the Deep, which is an interesting boss fight in that it's kind of a bunch of enemies you have to manage throughout the entire encounter. I do like to bring Boris and Henri along just because their story is tied to Aldrich, and this area is also tied to Aldrich, so it's nice to bring them along with the fight. And in this situation, I actually did have Frost attached to our character, so we could actually
Right here.
use that against all of these enemies, which was nice. And again, you just kind of go through the crowd over and over, following the highlighted Deacon until you can bring down the overall health. Because the Deacon that is highlighted over there, you can see in a moment, is the main Deacon that we're trying to attack.
I'll pour us out a bit.
There he is. He's always pretty much protected in the middle. And again, there is a phase change that is associated with this fight, where all of a sudden the Deacons start building up this dark pool of dark magic. And you gotta be careful for those when they start flying at you. They can do a lot of damage. I don't hate the boss fight, I don't love it either. It's just kind of in the middle for me. But it is kind of fun to use Frost on them. And coming in next, we have High Lord Volnir. He is found in the catacombs, of course. And the whole thing with Volnir is you have to attack his bracelets to get in the damage. He's not an overly tricky fight, as long as you can avoid his poison mist that just can destroy your health bar if you get stuck in it. He does do a couple of things with some skeletons, I believe. And he does have like a sweeping attack with his sword, but not too tricky of an encounter and not overly stressful usually. Not a super great boss, but not a terrible boss either. He's kind of interesting, and it is kind of cool to see this giant skeleton just crawling towards you, which does make for an interesting spectacle as far as the view is concerned. Yeah, I don't mind High Lord Volnir. He is just middle of the road for me, though. And up next we have Osiris, the Consumed King, found in the Consumed King's Garden, an optional boss that is kind of cool to look at. He does have a throwback to Seath, which is kind of interesting, becoming a pale dragon or trying to. His attacks are all over the place, a very erratic encounter. He is very vocal too, especially once Ocelot is no longer alive. If Ocelot ever was alive, that's kind of the question. Is he crazy in thinking he does have Ocelot in his clutch, or is Ocelot kind of imaginary? It's kind of hard to tell sometimes. But overall, probably a middle of the road boss. Not too great, not too bad. And of course, the next boss we have here is Vort of the Boreal Valley. Another fun one. I definitely always enjoy the encounter involving Vort. Very cool entrance as well. And it's kind of like the first main boss, where Udic Skundir was kind of like a tutorial area. This is your first like real, I think, way of seeing the first main boss of Dark Souls 3. And of course, Vort inflicts frost damage, which is kind of interesting to have to deal with. But because Vort is within armor, it's also good to have lightning on hand, which is what we used for this one. And it's just always a fun fight because you get to get right behind Vort and gain quite a lot of damage if you can get your position in correctly. And again, there's also a phase change within this battle, where Vort gets a little crazy. He starts running back and forth around the arena. I think he's coming up soon. There he goes. And he also has moments where he just launches a whole bunch of ice and frost at you. And again, just stay behind him and not too tricky to deal with. And up next we have Aldrich, the Devourer of Gods. Very interesting boss in Dark Souls 3. Not my favorite always, but also I think it's mostly just because of the magic that he shoots all the time. He's always hitting people with magic right here. And the arrows can be a bit much, but overall, it's cool to be in the arena. It takes you back to Ornstein and Smough. And the fact that he is devouring Gwendolyn is also very cool. And very interesting and very creepy all at the same time. He is weak to fire, which is nice, but overall, he's an interesting character in the lore, more so than an interesting fight. So it's always fun to get to that point in the game just because you're in Anor Londo, which is always an amazing time. And up next we have the Old Demon King found in Smoldering Lake. Kind of a middle-of-the-road boss for me. Nothing too special, but not terrible. It is kind of fun that you can bring Knightslayer Sorg along if you want. Not really necessary for this battle, but in this video we did bring him just for fun. And of course, lots of fire attacks here that he can use. But again, just kind of a middle-of-the-road boss, and it is kind of cool though that you get to get back to Ash Lake kind of with Smoldering Lake, so there's that kind of a connection. So that is probably the coolest part of this whole area. But again, just kind of a middle-of-the-road boss. Okay, here we have Udic Gundyr, which is the first boss in Dark Souls 3, and kind of like the tutorial area. And I've always been a big fan of Udic Gundyr. It is a great tutorial section, and one of the more fun early bosses to take on. Big sweeping motions, of course, but it's also fun if you can get off a parry, because then you get quite the riposte. And it's just a fun time, a great starting section for the entire game. It really sets the pace for what you are to be expecting as you continue along. And again, you can try to get a couple more parries in, which is just a lot of fun. And the cool thing about Udic Gundyr is that as you continue on, you get to see that Dark Souls 3 bosses are likely to have phase changes, because right when we get enough damage, which I think is coming up pretty soon here comes phase 2, and it's just cool to see that there are changes within the bosses. And then of course, with the Abyss creature attached, you can inflict more damage with fire. I don't think we used fire bombs for this section though, but they are very helpful. And next up we have the Champion Gundyr, which is kind of like a buffed up version of Udic Gundyr, and is a pretty cool fight. It's kind of like you gotta be a little more careful though, just because he does do a lot more moves and a lot more damage than Udic Gundyr does. And it's kind of cool how he's kind of like a secret area in the game, which is always an interesting time when you get to find that. I've never been great at parrying Champion Gundyr, but he is parryable. And of course right here he has a very long reach. And he's super aggressive, especially in phase 2 once his eyes start turning red. Best just try to get like behind him a little bit and take your opportunities when you can. Of course he does kick and grab and punch and lean in with his shoulder. He does a lot of moves. And he is relentless. Every time you think you have him, he just keeps on coming for you. Another boss that is hard to heal against just because of his aggression. So you really have to be mindful of your opportunities. And this fight, we actually, I believe we kill each other at the exact same time, which is pretty funny. Yeah, he's a pretty good boss. And up next we have Dragon Slayer Armor. A very aggressive, very fun, awesome fight. Kind of near the late game area, right before Lorien and Lothric. I believe it is a Pilgrim Butterfly infused with the armor of a Dragon Slayer, which makes for a very interesting concept. Again, super aggressive. His lightning axe is tremendous, as well as his shield. You have to just pick your spots when you can get an opening. Kind of avoiding that attack will give you an opening each time. And sometimes you do have to use the arena to help you to kind of kite him around the fountain. And then as phase 2 happens, you really have to deal with a lot of just random butterfly magic raining down on you. And that can be a little much sometimes. It can even get you. You can be having a great run and all of a sudden that stuff raining down will just hit you and poof, you get hit, and then it leads to the Dragon Slayer armor coming at you, and then there goes your run. So just always be mindful of the randomness of phase 2. But again, a very fun fight, and definitely one to look forward to each time. And up next we have the Demon Princes, or the Demon Prince. It kind of fuses together once you fight the Demon in Pain and the Demon from Below. Once you take on both of those, the one that's remaining last will then become the Demon Prince, and it is quite a battle. And depending on which demon you kill first will kind of dictate what the Demon Prince is going to do between his laser attacks and his fireball attacks. But lots of aggressive physical moves with the arms. He can even grab you, and then he flies around, shoots fire everywhere. Always an intense battle. You definitely get a feel for what it would be like to be running around as a demon is trying to kill you. And of course, weak to bleed, which is always helpful. And having a fire resistant shield definitely helps. But once you get going, you can get a riposte in if you get enough damage, which is always helpful. And here's all that fire just spewing forth. But that is the Demon Prince. Always a battle to look forward to. And coming in at number 10 is, of course, Yhorm the Giant. Now, mostly this is just for the spectacle of the event. We have, of course, our friend here coming in, the Onion Knight, and the whole part where we're fighting Yhorm with him is always a special moment in the game. And it's kind of cool to see that he was a friend also to Yhorm, and he's trying to essentially help Yhorm progress along here and do what he was supposed to be doing. Of course, there is always a sad part to this because it's hard to keep the Onion Knight alive. Sometimes he just does not make it. And here we gotta quick get the Storm Ruler, because that is the most effective way of taking on Yhorm. And by the time we can get this Storm Ruler equipped, sadly, the Onion Knight is already in a bad spot. Okay, once we get that, yep, he's already almost done, which is unfortunate. But all you have to do is just keep attacking Yhorm with the Storm Ruler, and you will do pretty good damage.
We're kind of stuck by that pillar.
And he's going to focus his attention on us very soon. And it is kind of cool how Yhorm is deep within the Profane Capital, and it just goes and goes and goes deeper and deeper, and it's amazing to be that far below the surface. I find the most effective way to take on Yhorm is to just run through his legs every once in a while. Again, it's a very cool looking fight though. And it is always a highlight in my opinion. And that is why Yhorm has made his way into my top 10 for Dark Souls 3 bosses. And up next we have the Soul of Cinder, which is the final boss in the main game, and always a fun spectacle of a fight, just because it invokes the moments of all of Dark Souls, kind of, because the Soul of Cinder kind of goes in between different types of fighting styles, between like a pyromancer or a sorcerer, miracles, sometimes uses like a dex weapon. Is just a very cool encounter, and it's reminiscent of Gwyn from Dark Souls 1, especially in Phase 2 as the music kicks in, and it's just always a treat to look forward to. It used to be kind of a tough one for me, but after fighting him enough times, it has become more manageable, and is always a fun fight to take on right before finishing the game. And coming up next are the Abyss Watchers, which to me is probably a top 10 encounter in Dark Souls 3. Just an amazing overall fight, especially when you walk in at first and then you fight one, and then all of a sudden another one wakes up, and then another one wakes up, and they're fighting each other, and it's just a lot to take in as far as the atmosphere of the fight. And then of course we're going to be showing Phase 2 here, mostly, where you're fighting the main Abyss Watcher, where there's a lot of fire action going on. And the main thing that I've always enjoyed about this fight is that it's very theatrical. It's just very fun. And you definitely want to try to get behind the Abyss Watcher, because then you can get in a backstab if you can, which is always very helpful. Gives you a moment to then get a little bit of extra damage in. And again, here come those big firing sweeps and attacks. And another backstab. But overall, it's a very fun fight, and I always look forward to it. Let's see, is it top 5? I think it's just more top 10 for me, but because there's just so many great bosses in Dark Souls 3, but this is definitely a noteworthy one. And kind of like the first difficulty spike in the game, because you're just walking through, you get through Udiksgundir, you get through Vort, and so on, and then all of a sudden, boom, you hit the Abyss Watchers, and they can be quite a lot, especially on your first playthrough. But overall, you just kind of work your way through, and slowly but surely, you just kind of keep taking down the Abyss Watcher until finally you get him down. He's almost there.
One more should do it.
And again, just kind of try to get in between some of those big fire attacks. They can be very devastating if they hit you. And I think there's just one or two more hits here. But yeah, definitely a fun one. Always look forward to it. And up next we have Lorien and Lothric, the two princes, near the end of the main game here. And of course there's two phases. First phase you just fight Lorien, and then in the second phase Lothric resurrects him and you fight both of them at the same time. Lothric sits atop Lorien's back, and Lorien does a lot of the physical fire damage with his sword as Lothric is shooting all his magic at you. I find it is best to stay close if you can. Always circle around to try to get attacks on both Lorien and Lothric, because Lothric will keep resurrecting Lorien, so you have to whittle down Lothric's health the most. Getting closer here. Those big attacks are very devastating if they land on you. Almost to the part where you can kind of get a moment to attack Lothric directly, right here. And of course he's going to be trying to resurrect Lorien, and always a fun challenge near the end of the game. Definitely one to look forward to each time, especially with the lore behind Lothric and Lorien for Dark Souls 3. And up next we have the Dancer of the Boreal Valley, which is easily a top 10 fight for me. I always look forward to encountering the Dancer. You can't encounter her much earlier if you kill Emma right away, right around the time you are about to fight Vort, but that does make it a bit of a challenge. It does open up the world a bit, so you can get some items, because you can get to, I believe, the Consumed Garden. But I always save the Dancer for much later in the game, right after, usually after Aldrich. And as we can see, lots of sweeping attacks. She's got a fire blade, and I believe she also can do like a dark magic attack as well once she imbues her other blade. Just a cool, elegant back and forth encounter here. I love the spinning. The spinning attacks are just so cool. And it is interesting how Pontiff and her are kind of connected to each other. I'd like to say he did some bad things to the dancer, though, because she's like fused to her metal armor. I can only imagine what Pontiff Sulyvahn did to her. But yeah, easily a very awesome fight. Top 10 for me. I look forward to it every single time. And coming in at number 5 is Pontiff Sulyvahn, which is always an amazing boss fight to look forward to. And here we got the parry off, which was always a fun moment if you can get that. But the whole point of facing Pontiff in Irithyll is just, it's so cool. Even everything about Irithyll is some of my favorite parts of Dark Souls 3. So he is just a crazy cool boss that is quite the challenge sometimes, especially the first time facing him. He was something else. He was the difficulty spike that I was not ready for on my very first playthrough. Of course, after a little while he does his phase change, and he then has a clone of himself, which does make for an interesting encounter here. And he's like a true villain. He feels, and his lore just feels like he is a villainous character in all of Dark Souls 3. So it's definitely nice to keep him in. I think that he's definitely top 5 for me as far as the Dark Souls 3 bosses. And up next in our top 5 at number 4 is Sister Frieda and Father Ariandel. A 3-phase fight that is full of intensity, full of aggression, depending on which phase you're in. Phase 1, it's kind of a slow back and forth between Sister Frieda. Phase 2, you have to deal with both of them. Primarily, I deal with Father Ariandel, just kind of get behind him, and then you can pretty much just focus on him as he's trying to hit you with his giant fiery cauldron. Of course, Sister Frieda can heal them both throughout the second phase. You just kind of have to work against that as best you can. And then, of course, after you defeat their joined health pool, you can fight either one in Phase 2. You then get Phase 3, which is where the fun really starts. And now you're fighting Sister Frieda again, solo. And she uses all the attacks. She's got Black Flame, she's got ice attacks, she's all over the arena, she disappears, hopped around back and forth, and you have to be very careful and very mindful of every attack that she is throwing against you. But the moment is so epic, it is so amazing. It is easily a top 5 fight, and definitely one to look forward to each time. And at number 3 we have the Nameless King. Though this is a 2-part boss fight, the King of the Storm is probably, in my opinion, the weaker part of the boss encounter. While it looks really cool when he flies in, dealing with the camera has never been fun, and dealing with the fire attacks has never been that fun for me. But overall, that's a nice lead up into the main event, which is when you actually fight the Nameless King one-on-one, and that is an amazing encounter. Easily top 3 for me. There's just so much momentum, and it's an epic moment in the game, especially when it's Gwyn's nameless son, which is just awesome to think about. The whole betrayal behind the Nameless King and Gwyn and the dragons. And then now you get to fight him. You've been hearing about him throughout the first 2 games. And then seeing his statue always crumbled. It's just so cool to actually fight the Nameless King. And he has a lot of interesting attacks. A lot of wind attacks, lightning attacks, flies all over the place. The arena itself can be a little disorienting because you're in the clouds. But it's almost like a dance once you get going. Kind of hop and weave. Having a shield that is great with lightning defense also helps quite a bit. And he can do a lot of damage very quickly, so you always have to be very careful when fighting the Nameless King. A good fight can turn into a bad fight very quickly. But usually once I get to this section, the fight is pretty manageable in the sense that the first part with the King of the Storm is always so much more tricky for me. But slowly getting him down here. He has a big attack coming up soon. There it is. And the cool thing is you can get in some good ripostes against the Nameless King if you do enough damage on him. He'll just kind of fall to his knees. Of course, embering always helps when you can take advantage of that. Whenever I feel like I'm about to have a pretty good run against the Nameless King, if I'm not embered, I try to ember up just to give me a little extra health. And up next in our number 2 slot is Dark Eater Midir, a battle that is always something to look forward to once you get to the Ringed City. And just like take a look at everything that Midir can do. He's got the dark magic, he's got the fire, he's got the extreme physical attacks. It is so cool to just be in the same arena with Dark Eater Midir. You always have to be very careful. At any moment, he can just destroy your entire run that you're working on against him. I think it's a he. I never really looked into it, but I get the vibe that it might be a male dragon. My strategy's always been going for the head and the tail. And of course we have the fire attack, always good to run underneath. And once you get a little further along here, he's got such a huge health pool, it really does build up the intensity as his phases change. But not too bad once you get a nice flow going, and it doesn't take too long once you get a nice rhythm. And that is Dark Eater Midir. Top 2 in the entire game. And finally, at our number 1 spot, not to a surprise to anybody, Slave Knight Gale is, to me, the most amazing fight in Dark Souls 3. One to look forward to every time you start a new playthrough. The epicness, the awesomeness of this encounter is at every moment in the fight. The fact that it's 3 phases, he has a huge health pool, goes between using his cape as some type of magic wielding shield. He's got all the, I don't know if that's blood magic or what he's using. It is intense, it gets in your way, it is always an obstacle to deal with. His sword attacks are aggressive, he's hopping around, he's even got a little crossbow that he shoots at you. Phase 1 and 2, here's the explosion of all the flaming bloody skulls that comes towards you. The arena is amazing in this barren wasteland of an area in the, it's almost like at the end of the world that takes place at the end of the game. And the whole fact that he is infused with the Dark Soul by going after all the pygmies is just adds to the moment of the encounter. And this one is definitely like a dance. If you can avoid his attacks, you kind of weave in and out. And it is always special to look forward to this one. And he gives you as much as he can, but that is Slave Knight Gale. And that is my official ranking of the Dark Souls 3 bosses. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you.